Hello, and welcome to the MovieMouth Film and TV Podcast, the podcast where we watch new or old movies and give them a damn good seeing to. This is Miles.
This is Phil.
And when this baby hits 88, you're going to hear some serious shit. So this week, we will be discussing the new Steve Carell, Greg Daniels Netflix comedy, Space Force. We'll have an interview with a tell-all film critic who's going to go into his experiences in the film industry. And we're also going to be talking about some classic movies later in the show. But before we do that, let's jump into the news. So Phil, come on, tell us, what have you been watching this week?
This week I managed to catch a couple of films, just channel hopping on TV, as you do. And that sort of classic thing of just, you can see a film's on, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to watch it now.
Go on.
So
what caught your eye?
I watched Kill Bill Volume 1.
Oh, just the one?
Just the one. And I'd not seen that for a few years, so it was good to see that again. And
great movie.
The other, such a good film. And the second one I watched was, this was a bit of a blast from the past because I don't think I've seen it since I saw it at the cinema, but it was Identity with John Cusack.
Yes. Who else was in that? John Cusack
and Ray Liotta.
Ray Liotta, that's right. Yes. It's something about split personalities, I seem to remember. I've seen it once. I think they're all in a motel or something. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a bit... It's nothing special. It's all right. It's watchable. But yeah, I as I said, I'm pretty sure I saw it when it came out, but I haven't seen it since then. And yeah,
bit of a brain twister.
Yeah, definitely. But it was all right. It was watchable.
This week, I actually started watching Community, which I'd never actually seen before. I think I'm now 2 seasons in. God bless COVID-19 because
you've not seen it before, so you're watching it fresh.
Absolutely fresh. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Cool.
So you've got like a lot of amazing, actors. I think that really got a start in that, like Donald Glover, Alison Brie. You've got obviously Chevy Chase in there as well, who I think was probably the initial draw for a lot of people, but actually wasn't really the one to kind of flourish from it, and of course was eventually fired from the show. But just a really good show, actually, and I really actually have enjoyed watching that because of the level of film references. So if there's anyone out there that hasn't seen it, highly recommend it because, if you love your movies, you're really going to get a lot out of it, a lot of references that in some cases even passed me by. And of course, it's got the incredible paintball episode that was directed by Justin Lin, who went on to direct many of the Fast and Furious movies, in fact, the good Fast and Furious movies. And of course, a lot of the episodes are also directed by the Russo brothers, who then went on to direct the Captain America movies for Marvel, and then subsequently Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, which is one of my favorite films of the last 10 years, without a doubt. So really worth dipping into if you get a chance to pick on that. That's on Netflix here in the US. I'm not sure if it's available.
I think it's all available over here as well.
There in the UK, yeah.
It's a great show, yeah.
Really good, really worth picking up on. So Phil, have you seen any good trailers this week? Any kind of surprise new movies dropping out that you
trailer-wise
in watching?
Instead of trailers, I got quite excited when I saw the Bill and Ted, some news on the new Bill and Ted film.
Excellent,
excellent. Yeah. So I was pretty pleased to see that because it's meant to be coming out this summer. Whether I guess it still is with the situation at the moment, but so I'm pretty excited to see that. It's called Bill and Ted Face the Music.
Wow. And isn't it crazy how, let's face it, Keanu Reeves hasn't aged since the first movie.
He looks exactly the same. Yeah,
he literally does.
Magic skin.
What else was Alex Winter in? He as Bill.
He was in. The only other thing I can think off the top of my head is he was in The Lost Boys.
Yes.
And I can't think of what else he was in, to be honest with
you.
The
only thing I think about when I think about The Lost Boys, and I know it's a cult classic, I know people love it, but the only thing I can ever think about is a bodybuilder wearing chains playing a saxophone with a
I knew
ponytail.
you were going to say that. I was going to say, was it an oiled up saxophone player
Yeah, I
with a
forgot the
ponytail?
oil, but he's
Yeah,
definitely oiled up as well. That is
it's
literally the only thing. And Jason Patrick, I believe, is in it.
yeah,
Kiefer Sutherland.
yeah,
Pretty much it.
it's yeah, but great film. I love that film.
No, that is a great film. That is a great film. So that's an interesting one. I saw the trailer for Tenet, the new Chris Nolan movie, which
Right.
looks absolutely batshit crazy. It appears to have something to do with time control, perhaps reversing time. There's a car scene where cars are flipping backwards in reverse. You've got Robert Pattinson in there with the quintessential Christopher Nolan side parting that all of the characters in his movie seem to have. So, you know, the likes of Leo seem to have the same in Inception. Of course, Bale had the same in the Batman movies. And there's also a scene where a jumbo jet appears to crash into a hangar of some kind. It looks
That sounds good.
insane. Yeah. And it's supposed to be coming out in July, which is a stretch right now considering it's June and, you know, we can't even walk down to a bar and have a drink inside. So we'll see if that one gets moved back, but I'm really pumped for that one.
Yeah, I mean, a Christopher Nolan film's always a good thing, in my book.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the Blu-ray box set very recently that I want to dip back into and start watching those all over again. But just the level of quality that guy puts out is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So this week's review, we sat down to watch 2 episodes of the Steve Carell, Greg Daniels comedy for Netflix, Space Force, which is a brand new show on Netflix. You can see actually all 10 episodes that are available right now. It's a very, very high budget, high concept comedy. It follows Steve Carell as General Nerd, a Air Force general who is promoted to a 4-star general to head up the Air Force's new Space Force division. And we follow him as Space Force as he interacts with all of a multitude of different cast and crew, including John Malkovich, Ben Schwartz, and many more. So Phil, what did you think about this one?
I mean, so I've watched the first 2 episodes and I like it so far. I think maybe I think it's not as funny as I thought it was going to be. But I think it works for what it is. I think it works fine. You know, this is from 2 episodes in, so I've got there's quite a few more to go. So I'll give it more of a chance.
I'm actually laughing because I know we've both seen the 2 episodes. The second episode being one of the most bizarre episodes of TV I think I have ever seen.
Yeah, I think bizarre is the perfect word to describe episode 2.
I think we should right now just state that there will be some spoilers. So if you haven't seen the first 2 episodes of Space Force, you know, feel free to go back and watch them before re-listening to this. If you don't really care, feel free to listen because we are going to go into detail on it. And some of the things that we say out loud will probably throw you for 6. I mean, let's get into, you know, the positives. What did you think worked?
So, even though it's a comedy, I think one of the things that struck me the most first was the cinematography of it.
It looks amazing.
It looks fantastic. It looks great, and I love the way that loads of the shots are put together, the way the shots are composed. It's really like photographic. It's got that like photography school of composition for just symmetry and shots. And there was lots of like in the first episode, early on, there's some like dialogue where the actors look straight at the camera, which I really liked. And I wondered if that was going to be a thing that carried on through the show, because, you know, sometimes that's a thing. But it hasn't seemed to be. So it was just a one-off type thing. But I quite like things like that when it's sort of just a bit different from the norm, you know?
I love that opening scene with Steve Carell as General Nerd and Noah Emmerich as Kit Graveston, where they're kind of talking to each other and you see the camera kind of looking down on Steve Carell because obviously Kit Gravison is a lot higher than him, and he's kind of
Yeah.
looking up to him. That was great. That kind of playfulness and that direction from that first episode, I think they really set the tone for what's to follow it. It was actually directed by Paul King, who it came through originally from the Mighty Boosh, Bunny and Bull story. Went on to direct the two Paddington movies, which if you haven't seen those, they are just wonderful movies. I'm not afraid to admit, as a grown ass man, that I shed a few tears at the end of the second one. But
I've not seen them yet.
you have to go back and watch them. They are really, really good. And
No, I've heard they're very good, but yeah.
the stylistic nature in which he directs is definitely a thoroughfare for all of his content that he puts out, and this is no exception. This is actually possibly even better. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I love that. Did you laugh? Did you find it funny?
I found moments funny. I mean, I probably laughed after the first episode. I thought, okay, there's some moments that's pretty funny in this. After the second episode, I think I laughed more, but I think it's because I was laughing at how absurd everything was. Like the entire 32 minutes or whatever it is of absurd TV that I just watched.
Of course, we're referring to the chimpstronauts, Marcus here.
Chimpstronauts. Yeah. the chimpstronaut. Yeah. So, I mean, episode 1 was a bit more, like any, I guess, episode 1 should be. It sets the scene, sets the characters, sets the sort of tone of what's to come, I'm guessing. Although I say that, but then judging by episode 2, it wasn't really.
So I've seen more than just the 2 episodes. I've seen up to episode 8 currently. Okay, and I can tell you that if they just put out those first 2 episodes, I would have probably just stopped there, like I did with the Orville, like I've done with so many other shows, where if the tone isn't quite right from that second episode post pilot, it can really put me off, and it doesn't do it for me. And I think in that second episode, because it is so bizarre and so out there, the kind of episode that you would usually see later in a season or later in a series in its life cycle, and I'm not talking about jumping the shark, but possibly space astronaut or chimpstronaut could become a new verb for jumping the shark. that I think it could lose a lot of momentum in those initial few episodes. Later on down the line, it definitely comes back to that initial that initial kind of tone that's been set in that first episode, and in particular the interplay between the characters. I think these actors really had a lot of chemistry. Noah Emmerich, we've talked about, with Steve Carell. I think also John Malkovich with Steve Carell, and that kind of opening scene where we're first introduced to John Malkovich, where
he's amazing. John Malkovich is so good at it.
And he basically tells Steve Carell that he hired him and that he could fire him, even though he clearly is not outranked. Is outranked by Steve Carell. Was just brilliant. I probably found one area that I really laughed though, and that was the scene with Steve Carell's father, who was played by the late great Fred Willard, who sadly passed away just last month in May 2020. And in his last role, he plays his frail father that we, as far as I can tell, only actually see over the phone to him or to Steve Carell's daughter. And in this scene, he gets a phone call from his dad, Fred Willard. And Fred Willard's there. He has his phone in his hand, and he's outside his house looking fairly shaken. And he tells Steve Carell that he climbed under the house to check a leak. And I quote, "I climbed under the house and didn't tell anyone that I was under there." And I don't know what it is about the delivery of the guy. You definitely have to see it. But he was just an absolute legend. And, I think sadly missed.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the stuff he's been in.
Yeah, I mean, what, For Your Consideration?
Best in Show.
Yeah.
I think he played another dad in, I think it's Modern Family. He's the dad of one of the main guys in Modern Family.
That's right. Yeah. One of his later roles, Spinal Tap.
Yeah. Oh,
just
yeah.
an absolute legend.
Yeah, absolutely.
And still had it. I mean, even at the age of 86 years old, he still had it, and he's still dropping lines, and still, for me, the funniest thing in the show, which just says it all.
Yeah.
Fred Willard then sadly departed and dearly missed. So, what didn't work for you? Would you say?
I think that some of it felt a bit. I think more in. I think that some of the delivery it felt a bit too much like the Anchorman school of like. I mean, I love Anchorman as both of them as films. I think that they're hilarious, but I think the way there's one scene in the first episode where he's doing like a speech to a school, like a
Hmm.
high school, and it just felt like he was that sort of not the Brick Tamlin, character from Anchorman, but he was given like a Ron Burgundy style of delivery of
Hmm.
sort of these sort of quippy jokes, and I, I don't know, it was fine, but I think it sort of great that in particular grated with me a little bit, but there was bits later on that sort of made up for that, I think, anyway. But
And this is Steve Carell playing a very gruff military general with a very gruff military voice.
yeah, which I must
Um,
say, like he does pretty well. I think he sort of gets into that, that military way of speaking, which I'm sure you will have if you're sort of that high up in the military.
there was that great scene where he can't sleep at night, and he kind of climbs out of bed and makes his
Yeah,
bed like he's a general with his wife still asleep, and kind of marches out of the room. I just thought that was brilliant. He's obviously done a
yeah,
lot of
that's really good.
character work on this. Yeah.
Speaking of
Uh,
which, his wife, played by Lisa Kudrow, uh, another odd, I think, weird inclusion. Sort of not much screen time there, and
what is
then
she doing in there? Why have they brought in Lisa Kudrow from Friends and basically taken her off screen for most of it? I mean, we see her basically throughout the series in a cameo role.
yeah, basically, yeah,
She has so much more to give than that. I find that really, really unusual. I mean, although I would say perhaps finding out why she's off screen could be interesting,
yeah.
being that she's in a maximum security prison and we don't know why.
Yeah, that was a fun cut to him going to see his wife.
That was pretty unusual. That was pretty unusual.
Yeah.
I think they obviously spent a lot on the effects here, and I
Yeah,
feel
the
like
effects look
perhaps
great.
wow. I mean, the first time you see the base, when you see the rockets going up, the satellites, the scene at the end of the first episode where the Chinese satellite rips off the solar panels off of the satellite that they've just put into
Yeah.
orbit. I mean, all
But
of that
even like
looks great.
the chimp stuff in the second episode, like that's really well animated. It's really well
Mind
done.
blowing. It's
Yeah.
on par with the Planet of the Apes movies, and
I
I
would
don't mean
say
the
so.
ones with the
Yeah, it's pretty
pixels.
close. I mean, for TV, I mean, I'm sure this has got a huge budget, but TV generally gets a little bit left behind when it comes to um, special effects and stuff because they just don't have as much of a budget a lot of the time to spend on sort of that blockbuster effects.
I mean, all we can say about Marcus is that he may not be the best chimpstronaut of all time, but he is definitely the best looking chimpstronaut of all time.
He's the best rendered chimpstronaut I've ever seen in my life.
I think they spent more money on the chimpstronaut than they did on the script because the jokes just ain't there. They're not in there. And a lot of the jokes feel like it's almost like a family show, but then every other word is the F bomb, which I
Yeah,
usually find hilarious. But
yeah,
in this case, I didn't. It just didn't quite click. And I felt like with all those actors, the cast they've assembled here, a lot of improvisers. You've got Steve Carell, Ben Schwartz, who's known for his comedy troupe doing improv live on stage. None of them are able to improvise. And I feel like maybe the suits at Netflix spent so much money on this that they really hunkered down on making sure that actors stuck to the script so that what followed was a natural occurrence of CGI that took months and months and months and months to build based on the script that had already been written.
yeah. Maybe I've got a question for you actually. So, do you know
Here we
because you've
go.
seen more? Because you no, only because you've seen more episodes than me. And
Seven and a half inches.
but in episode 1, I really like the scene where he's having a very stressful day,
Mhm.
And he goes into his office, says, don't disturb me for 5 minutes, no calls. And then he stands staring out of the window, trying to collect his thoughts. And suddenly, I would say, in only the way that sort of Steve Carell can, breaks into what's it called, Kokomo by the Beach
The
Boys.
Beach Boys, yeah.
Yeah. He starts, sort of mouthing it and then speaking it, and then gradually breaks into full on singing and dancing, which I found, again, quite odd, but really funny. I quite enjoyed that. But then, so the question was, because in the second episode, they feature Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival. And I can't think of like other songs in the episode. So it seems, do you know if it's a feature that they sort of do a song per episode that they sort of feature a bit heavily?
There are some musical elements for sure in some of the other episodes. Yeah, there are some other ones. You've got that scene at the start of the first episode, for example, where he's driving in and he's playing the music with kind of nonchalantly with the guy, the gas station attendant in the trunk.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
So they use music in really interesting ways, and again, I think a lot of that is Paul King and the way that he's kind of set that up in the rest of the show, because of that playfulness that I think he's really injected. Yes, it does, and you do see more of that as the show progresses.
Okay, that's good. I like a bit of music. I like a montage to music and things.
We love it. Who would you say, in terms of the characters, which ones really appealed to you?
I think I do like Steve Carell's character. John Malkovich, though, is amazing as the scientist. Dr. Mallory, I think is his name. Yeah, Dr.
Malkovich, isn't it?
Dr. Malkovich Mallory.
And all he says is Malkovich, 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 Malkovich.
Yeah.
He hasn't got any lines, just says Malkovich.
But Malkovich, it's like his delivery of stuff is just so good. Yeah. Always, in whatever he's in. I really like him, John Malkovich.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about the first episode and the motherfucker at the end of it.
That was amazing.
And it's actually echoed by John Malkovich at the start of the second episode.
Yeah, which I thought was really good.
Pretty good move. I really liked Yuri, or Bobby, quote unquote, the Russian officer who may or may not be a spy. Is definitely sneaky and is also in a slightly problematic twist. Seeing Steve Carell's teenage/high school daughter and taking her out on dates.
Yeah.
Okay. But I quite liked his arc. I liked the fact that he has that kind of shiftiness and we don't really know what he's up to. If he's actually up to anything, whether he's just a bit of an airhead.
But also the most stereotypical Russian like that you can get, he pulls up in his car like with like Euro pop like blasting from it, and then stops it to speak to her, and he's like, we could finish this, and it's he's got a bottle of vodka. It's just like,
I like that kind of,
they're going for the stereotype.
Yeah, they definitely are. I feel like they do tend to kind of feature him slightly less later as the series goes on, which I think is a shame, because I think he's got a lot to give, and that arc I really like that kind of back and forth. And I also really liked the helicopter pilot Angela Alley, who was played by Tawny Newsome, because I think
she's really good, actually.
She's probably the only human being in the show.
Yeah, she's she's the only normal person in the entire show.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think she may become the moral center of the show. The kind of audience eyes kind of watching and reacting. I think that's kind of where she is. But so a lot of the cast I like a lot of the cast. I'm not sure whether it all gels together yet, all of the moving pieces. What would you say were your favorite moments, or your favorite moment of the two episodes?
I think there's a few I think that there's a few good lines in it. I like quite early on in the second episode where Steve Carell says they're faced with a problem that they need to solve. And he's talking to the scientists about it. And then he just says, we're going to Apollo 13 the shit out of this. Which I quite like.
Brilliant.
That was good. Weirdly as well, a weird thought that crossed my mind watching that episode, because he gets mentioned, but he mentions Brexit in it when they're talking about a few things. And I thought, I don't know if I've seen anything else yet mention
I found that
Brexit.
so strange.
I did. I
That
didn't
was
like
such
it.
a bad joke as well.
Yeah, it was really
He was
bad.
something like Brexit. What's next? Frexit? Swexit?
Yeah, it was.
Like,
That was it. That was
oh,
yeah. That was really bad.
it's
Yeah,
like, oh wow, we're current. We're talking about politics here,
yeah.
and I just,
In a comedy about Space Force.
yeah, so ham-fisted, so
Yeah,
ham-fisted.
but
I
that's
did,
the first thing that I could think of that references that since
yeah,
it's
in a
happened
high-budget American Netflix comedy
about space. Yeah,
about space, starring Steve Carell.
yeah,
I really liked. I have to say, it's no surprise. I love that Fred Willard scene.
yeah,
I also I think it was. I think actually it was really well played, and I think even Steve Carell, the way he's reacting to that, is brilliant.
yeah. It is actually. Yeah,
The fact that Fred Willard's calling Steve Carell to find out about how Steve Carell's wife is, and is clearly, you know, clearly isn't aware of really what's happening. Steve Carell obviously tells him that she's in prison. And then later on, when Fred Willard's carer comes to take him back into the house, he grabs the phone, and Fred Willard turns to the carer and said, "Ask him how his wife is." Like he's just already forgotten. And then
yeah.
Steve Carell, who finds out that his mother has disappeared and has gone walkabout somewhere in New Jersey, uses the high-powered NASA stealth telescope to spy on her and find where she is. And she's kind of just stood there in a nightgown in the middle of a grocery store car park.
Yeah.
And he actually uses the line, "We have to use the satellite again."
Yeah, I like he's already got his other phone out on the phone to I need it again.
I think those little moments are what makes it. Those more subtle moments, I
Yeah,
think, are what makes it for me the more enjoyable. The ham-fisted, the Brexit jokes, the chimpanzee in space that has eaten the dog. Spoiler alert. Just some of the most bizarre things that you could see, but also not really that funny. Funny because it's insane, but not because it's really well written. Is my opinion of that. And I think when we talk about how it could be better, I would say make it more funny. I think try and let the actors do what they do best, which is that improv piece, which is the reactions, which is not sticking to a script because they have to put the framework in of millions of dollars of budget for effects. How about yourself?
No, I was just going to say, I think what I found really funny as well was, well, not funny, because of the weirdness of the whole second episode. The end scene of that was actually quite touching. It was quite a nice scene. It was serious, and I found that quite obviously they've done it on purpose because it's been weird, balls out, bizarre half an hour leading up to that sort of couple of minute scene. But I thought it was quite good.
Yeah, there's definitely a warm heart in there somewhere, and I think a lot of that comes from the chemistry between the leads that are in it.
Yeah,
I just think it's something you have to absorb the rest of the episodes to really start to see that as well, and that's what really keeps you coming back is the kind of interplay between the characters, and less so the effects, less so the weird twists such as a chimpstronaut or a dogstronaut hanging out in space.
yeah.
Although it's one of those things where, it's like a car crash. Like you can't take your eyes away from it in some places.
Yeah, yeah. But I think overall, I'm going to carry on watching it.
Yeah, no, I think. I'm already 8 episodes in, so I'm definitely going to watch the last 2.
You might as well.
So tonight, Matthew, on Stars in Their Eyes. If you had to be,
no one in America, if anyone's listening in America, is going to get that at all.
I just love the fact that people will be Googling it and seeing Matthew Kelly, seeing the Stars in Their Eyes stage, seeing people come out as George Michael or Paul Weller.
I miss it.
Just simply incredible.
Yeah.
But in this section in Stars in Their Eyes, this is going to be a weekly recurrence. We're going to talk about who you would be if this show was real. So if the character itself was you, who would you be?
Now, I'm not going to go for smarts here. Like I'm not a smart man in the science sense. But I think
I'm not a smart man, but I know what love is.
I know what love is. But yeah, I'd go for John Malkovich because I like his he's just like you can just tell he's just like, just shut up, just listen, because I've got the actual answer that you want. And I like his sort of no bullshit. Like, and I like the fact that he clearly sees that something that's going on is not going to work, so he just goes away and works on the actual thing that will help the situation. And I like to think I'm a little bit like that sometimes.
You definitely are. Yeah, you definitely are. No, I think
What about
he's.
you?
I think I can imagine you as Dr. Mallory for sure. Definitely not Steve Carell. You're more self-aware than that. I think I would, if I had the choice, I'd definitely be Lisa Kudrow's character, because that way I wouldn't have to see all of the other characters day to day, because they're all, let's face it, abominable human beings. So I think I'd rather be behind bars, having
enough.
a ton of sex in jail. Okay, so if we recast this show, who would you choose in the leads? Who would you pick to play the lead with Steve Carell?
Now, this probably sounds like an obvious choice, but I could 100% see it being Will Ferrell.
Yeah, great,
Easy, because you know, he could do that. Has Will Ferrell done a military role? I'm trying to think in anything.
possibly a cameo, but
Yeah,
certainly not a starring role.
but no, he could 100% just drop straight into doing that and be funny, or if not funnier. Although I like them both, so that's nothing against Steve Carell.
He's coming up soon in a new Netflix comedy called Eurovision with Rachel McAdams, which looks fucking insane.
It looks amazing. I can't wait for that. Have you seen the video the song video they released for that? It was amazing. It's like just them on a mountain on a glacier, like just it looks insane. I can't wait for that.
He's wearing like what can only be described as camp Viking attire.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no other way to describe it.
I'm in, and of course, as soon as that drops, we'll be reviewing that one.
It's already on my add to watch list.
Oh, I love it. We will definitely be reviewing that in a later podcast to come. I think
who would you recast?
I'm trying to think about this. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge Jim Carrey fan, so I would probably go with Jim, just because he plays straight man falling apart very well, and
extremely well.
Yeah, I mean, movies like Fun with Dick and Jane is a really good example of that. If you haven't seen that, check that one out. Or Kidding on Showtime here in the US, where he's playing basically a children's entertainer whose life is slowly falling apart. Yeah, and he plays it very well. He does that depth of drama and comedy well. You feel for him at the same time as kind of getting laughs out of him. But I don't know. I feel like Steve Carell is kind of perfectly placed here in this role.
Yeah, I think he's really good at it. But
just love to see him have a little bit more license to be slightly more freedom in the role itself.
Yeah.
So as we close out this review, would you give this a recommendation, Phil, or would you tell
definitely
to avoid
I'd
it?
say no. I wouldn't say avoid it. I don't think it's as bad as that at all. I think it's completely watchable. I think it's especially at the moment. What else have we got to do? Fit on a nice comedy series that actually gives you a laugh.
Just sit on the couch, watch Netflix, and forget that we're all going to fucking die.
Yeah. So no, I'd recommend it for that reason.
Gets a thumbs up from me too. I just really want to see more comedy, more laughs as part of it, but I'll still keep watching it because I'm a sucker for new content.
Yeah.
And I want to see where this thing goes. So Space Force then on Netflix, that's available now and it gets a recommendation from both Phil and myself. Next, we have a new guest. So our guest this week is a professional film critic who has been lead film reviewer for Hilton Magazine, Cyprus Weekly, and worked for Time Out, and is currently in marketing and the projectionist for Allbridge Cinemas in the UK. Please welcome Sean Chrysanthou. Hi, Sean. Welcome to the MovieMouth podcast.
Hi, guys. Great to be here. How you doing?
Hi, Sean. Thanks for coming along.
No problem.
Absolutely. How are you finding life in COVID-19 Britain?
It's a bit surreal. I kind of have this vague feeling that we're going to think this never actually happened in about 6 months' time. But
Yeah.
all good, to be honest with you. From my point of view, getting a lot of stuff watched. Obviously, it's a horrible time globally for a lot of people, but trying to make the best of it.
What have you been watching while in quarantine?
Anything and everything, really. Found the how useful it is to have about 8 different streaming subscriptions is always useful. Catching up on some old stuff, trying to be with some new stuff. And catching up on Community, which I missed first time around. So
Funnily enough, we talked about that earlier on in the episode.
Yeah. Well, Miles and Abed's podcast. Yeah.
Welcome to Miles and Abed's podcast. Thanks again for joining us. I think so. I think a good place to start is always talking to people about their favorite ever movie-going experience, because at the end of the day, the thing that connects us all is the fact that we, as people, had once a great movie-going experience, fell in love with the art of film, and we're all here today talking about it, nerding out over it. So can you tell us your favorite, or maybe your first movie-going experience, something that really that you really remember?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Probably showing my age a bit here, but I mean, I've got some great memories from childhood and things like that of going with family. Even seeing things like Mary Poppins and things like that. Coming out and trying to do the high kick to the side. I mean, first memory would be Star Trek motion picture, the very first one. Going to see that with my dad. That would be just before Christmas '79. Incredible. That just blew me away, and that stuck with me. I was 5, and it was an annual treat.
Wow.
With my dad going to see a film. Basically, while my mum and Gran were preparing Christmas mince pies, I seem to remember vaguely seeing. That became kind of a family tradition for quite a few years. So motion picture, that's kind of my in, really, and that just I can still remember how that just blew me away. That was literally was a different world. Yeah.
And that was it from there, basically.
So tell us a bit about your sort of your film background and how you got into what you're doing now.
I kind of I've got you should probably tell from the surname, I've got a Cypriot heritage. So my parents moved to Cyprus when I was 14, and then of course from the UK, and then we sort of lost access to TV and things like that. And while I'd always enjoyed film, that suddenly became the real kind of moment where film took over, helped by the fact that Cyprus had a very, shall we say, loose approach to copyright infringement laws. So, there were quite a lot of...
You wouldn't steal a car, Sean.
No, very true, very true. Yeah, I've got visions of a guy in a furnace beating out, on an anvil at the moment. But it is what it was. So there I was, 14, 15 years old, different country, didn't really speak the language. So suddenly with access to an insane number of movies, not necessarily in the best of quality, on VHS. Basically just kind of started feeding on film, really. Anything, I'd consume anything and everything. And it kind of basically grew from there. And then of course, as Cyprus, got a bit more with it, and things tightened up and the laws tightened up, money got invested in cinemas, so the cinemas improved.
Yeah.
I'd moved into print media by that time anyway. So I was working for a newspaper. I actually my career kind of took me into the motor trade additionally. So I qualified as a mechanic.
Okay.
And so then I joined a newspaper as a motoring correspondent, and obviously, kind of with the love of film there, kind of, hooked up quite closely with the guy who wrote on film for the paper, so I kind of became the sort of de facto fallback for if he was away or anything like that, or any films. I seem to remember writing the review for Gone in 60 Seconds with the glorious Nick Cage as Memphis Reigns. I seem to remember as one of the most memorable names.
Memphis
but
Rain.
yeah, it's not quite Devon Sunshine, is it? But
No.
yeah, that kind of morphed into. I then kind of moved into PR and some publishing. Started doing some easing into film writing for the Hilton and some other publications, and then basically a weekly newspaper approached me and asked me if I'd take over their film department. They were doing a major relaunch and asked if I'd take over the sort of film side of things, which I did. So I ended up with weekly writing on reviews, new features, what's upcoming, general feature writing, things like that. So yeah, it was good.
Can you?
So I kind of didn't quite fall into it, but almost fell into it, as it were.
That's the way the world works, I think. Can you tell us about a review that you maybe regret giving either a positive or a negative review to?
Do I regret giving?
Did you give, for example, Attack of the Clones 5 stars?
No, I didn't give Attack of the Clones 5 stars. I can assure you. No, that do I have any? No, I mean, what I will say is, on the one hand, that a film correspondent, and in many ways is a dream job, film critic. Hey, great, you get to actually sit down and watch no end of films for free. What I will say is that you keep in mind you do have to watch everything. Anything that
can't
comes
really
out.
be selective, can
Exactly, yeah. So, and by the time you're up to Saw 6, it's kind of hard to maintain your enthusiasm to some extent. But no, I was writing for a very general audience, so it wasn't something that I was trying to be overly filmic about, if you know what I mean. I've always approached film as an escape for me. It's always been fun first. And a film can be worthy. Don't get me wrong, and it should be. But at the end of the day, for most people, it's an escape from life for a couple of hours. So that's always been my approach to reviewing. And so I wasn't writing for Empire or any of the other major film publications. It was a general newspaper. So I tried to keep things light, tried to be as forgiving as possible. I've never made a movie. I've never made a film. So these guys have already got a kind of one up on me. So the fact they've actually got a film out there and made, but
right, nobody's trying to make a bad movie at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but after Saw, basically anything after Saw 1, really, it got very hard to maintain that positive viewpoint. It has to be said at times.
Safe to say that the Saw movies almost killed your enthusiasm for film.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But no, not really. But it is what it is. But no, I don't think I have any actual full-blown regrets. I'm sure if I've sat down and read there's a few things I might wonder quite where I was at. But,
So talking about the things that you might not have liked so much, what's your preferred genre?
I'm okay with anything really, as long as it's anything that's good, anything that's got a story to tell. I'm quite comfortable with. Back me in a corner, force me to say it would probably be sci-fi.
Okay.
That's that's what I shared with my dad to an extent. And growing up in growing up in Spielberg's world, Lucas's world, it's kind of ingrained.
Yeah, sure.
Not necessarily so much fantasy, but yes, certainly I would lean towards sci-fi.
Who would you say is your favorite director? I mean, are you Lucas or Spielberg or?
What of the two? Spielberg,
or
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, George Lucas has his moments, but
I mean, we can rephrase that to who's your favorite filmmaker, and then
I think one thing that working as a critic kind of forced me to do was to kind of open up a little bit more. Back in the day where I would have preached I would have preached Scorsese and things like that. I think, I became a lot more open and found it much harder to specifically zero in on one particular director or another. I think pretty much all of this major directors have got good work behind them. I think they've probably also got some stuff that I'm not so taken with. I love Tarantino on a good day. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I thought was superb. Indulgent, but superb. But I don't necessarily love all of his stuff. Same with any of them, really. And yet, on the other hand, I can celebrate a lot of. I celebrate a lot of what might be regarded as journeyman directors. The likes of, shall we say, John Badham. Not so much output these days, but I have an admiration for directors who can take stuff that might ordinarily have been fairly generic and are able to elevate it through getting the best out of performers. Movies he made back in the sort of through the 80s, I suppose, things like Stakeout and even earlier than that, Blue Thunder, things like that.
Okay.
Fairly regular, uncelebrated directors, but I think there's a. I don't think they necessarily get as much limelight as perhaps they should. But then again, maybe that helps them fly under the radar and just get on with the job.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So, what about what would you call your favorite ever movie scene? If you had to try and pin one down.
Favorite ever movie scene. Well, it's hard to ignore moments like the cafeteria scene in Heat, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like De Niro, you've got heavyweights like that facing off against each other. Indy confronted with the swordsman, moments like that, But favorite movie scenes. James Stewart in Harvey.
Nice.
There's a glorious scene where he's out in an alleyway talking about a potentially invisible 6'3.5" invisible white rabbit. Just it's glorious. And I think that's one thing that especially kind of growing up as a fan of sci-fi in the 70s and 80s, it gives you an appreciation for moments like this. It's a very good question, actually. It does give you an appreciation of moments in something that might not otherwise be that great. Sci-fi in that period, wasn't necessarily at its finest. Yeah, you had stuff like Star Wars, but the number of, forgive the phrase, clones that jumped out of the woodwork to try and cash in on that. Yeah. But you'd often find little moments of greatness in a film that would actually, elevate it far beyond. So yeah,
it's funny. I didn't realize Harvey was based on a Pulitzer Prize winning play. I'd love to have seen that back in the day. Can you imagine?
Yeah,
back in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, Jimmy Stewart himself actually appeared in it. He actually went on after doing the film and actually appeared in the play, if I remember correctly. So yeah, he had a real soft spot for the part. There's things like The Odd Couple. Where you can hear Jack Lemmon, Matt out, working against each other, things like that. There are moments of, for me, film is our it's our art form, isn't it? The generations that are currently here now, other people buy and sell art, expensive art, and they stand and hang it on their walls. But for us, it's movie and movie moments, and I guess that's probably why props and things like that from movies are so great.
Yeah.
Back to the Future, take pretty much any moment in Back to the Future is glorious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's fantastic filmmaking. Indie Star Wars, I'd struggle to name one.
That's fair enough. I think I would as well. So
yeah, but
I think you had me at Heat, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. That really is kind of that distills great cinema down to its purest essence. I think. When actually that what's happening there? It's just two guys in a cafe talking, but the sheer you can feel the years of experience between those guys, I think, and the fact that each of them is trying to do the best possible work they can. because they know the other guy is just going to take that scene away from them if they don't. And yet they managed to kind of internalize that and turn it back around into making it so unspectacular. It's spectacular, you know.
Completely agree. I don't know if you can hear me actually off mic. I'm just loading my Walther PPK, and I'm about to point it right between your eyes. So you're lucky that we've been separated by quarantine and by, of course, an ocean. And this is another one that you might struggle with. But who, Sean, would you say is your favorite Bond? And you can only pick one. If you have to pick one, or I'm going to pull the trigger. And you'll forever be remembered as an opening title to a Bond movie.
Yeah, that's interesting because, you know, if you'd asked me, you know, for most of my life, it would have been Connery. You know, I mean, I'm a big fan of the original Fleming books. That sounds really nerdy, doesn't it? But you know, they're a good little read, and I encourage anyone to. You know, they're all short, and you can spin through them in next to no time. So for years and years and years, it was Connery. And then, you know, probably from, you know, age range, you know, I gave Dole when I was going through my teenage area. You know, you have to observe the books, and everything has to be close to the books. You know, I liked a lot of what Dalton did, and blah 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 blah, and so on and so forth. And I really enjoy Craig with what he's done and reinventing the character. But I've got to be honest, while I poo-pooed him for a long time, I've actually, in time, grown to appreciate more. A lot more, as it were. In recent years than
I think Roger would have appreciated that pun, to be honest.
Yeah, indeed. I think just because I mean, if you look at Connery now, for me, it's just kind of he literally showed up. I think I think he I think Connery has a definite natural charisma, and later on went on to give great, very charismatic performances in things like The Rock, obviously, and so on and so forth. But I think Roger Moore is actually very underappreciated for what he actually brought to the series. And actually, I was actually discussing this recently with my cousin, who's a big film guy as well. And actually, his lockdown mission while in lockdown has actually been to watch all the Bond films from beginning to end.
Good luck for those later problems.
He's actually achieved it. Yeah.
But he actually watches the whole of what's the one? What's the one with
Die
ice?
Another Day. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that is the one.
Yeah.
Is that the one with the invisible Jaguar?
Yeah.
If he gets through all of that, then he deserves.
That's The World Is Not Enough, isn't it? Or is that The World?
No, it's Die Another Day with the Aston. Sorry to be completely geeky. The Aston. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it wasn't Aston. Yeah. See, I blocked it out. So
I don't necessarily blame you. But he made a good point, actually. I mean, I was interested. I was chatting to him and said, well, what do you take away from watching, 40, 50 years of Bond films back to back? And he said that it was quite interesting because he said, actually, Roger Moore came across as the most dangerous. And I said, what do you mean? I mean, I've always kind of associated Roger Moore as pretty much being, carry on Bond. But he said, but often because of that, because while the others there's some semblance of humanity or getting on with a job, Roger Moore would just murder somebody and then laugh about it and walk away. And I thought, that's kind of true, actually. So, in many ways, as he said, Roger Moore actually comes across as the kind of, in some ways, most disturbing Bond of all. I don't get me wrong, I love what Craig's done, but despite myself, I think looking back, I think what Roger Moore brought to the table was a lot of fun. So
who's your money on for the next Bond?
I'd like to see James Norton get a shot at it. Mm-hmm. I think he'd be good.
Yeah.
I think I've seen having seen him play kind of the sweet vicar, and then but on the other side the real evil Happy Valley villain.
Yeah.
I think I'd be interested to see that. A lot of people are
He would be
throwing
another
around.
blonde Bond, though, wouldn't he?
Wow, yeah. Look how difficult that got last time. I don't know. I would have liked to have seen Fassbender get a chance at the role, but too well known now, too old, too expensive. I think probably for
Tom Hardy for me. I'm sorry, but Tom Hardy.
Yeah,
for me.
Yeah, I think he'd be amazing.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe more of that blunt instrument of Craig, but I just feel like he's nailed on for it.
Okay, I'll reserve judgment until I see it. But again, usually Bond comes out of someone that guy, because it gives them a chance to make a few movies without paying the guy too much money, I guess. But
yeah,
true. Yeah. So, have you got any good stories about meeting any film or TV stars? Or is there a big
no, I don't have any great stories around it. I mean, I've met a few. Of course, as a person who's Star Trek: The Motion Picture was his first meeting, Shatner at a convention a number of years ago was probably the high point in many ways. And that guy just, I mean, this must have been about 8 years ago. That guy oozed energy. I mean, it was just incredible. I mean, I was just, they go in with that whole, you're not supposed to touch or shake hands. I put my hand out, shook hands. I mean, the guy was, I mean, he must have been like 85 then. I mean, first of all, the guy didn't have a line on his face, which, okay, I guess that can be correct. But it was like sitting next to, I don't know, a dilithium crystal or something. The vibration of energy coming out of the guy was just incredible. He was absolutely thoroughly charming, and I got a handshake. So that's
so just to be clear, you met William Shatner. He was vibrating, and then he somehow oozed energy all over your hand. Is that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Basically, pretty much, yeah. And I haven't watched it since.
Phil, I don't think we're going to get a better answer to this question. I think we should retire that question for the rest of the podcast.
For the rest of the podcast, actually, yeah. Beautifully put, Miles. Yeah, thanks for that.
What would you say is your favorite movie and why? Just the number one. It's like which is your favorite kid, but you have to pick one.
Oh no! If it was kids, I wouldn't have a problem doing that. But no, on movies, no, that's too tough a call. No, there's no, I couldn't. I can give you a bunch of movies that I absolutely love. The Rock, we already mentioned earlier. Obviously,
Great
New
movie.
Hope. Anything like that. I mean, if we, it's a cliche, but I think one of the greatest movies ever made is still Casablanca. It's endlessly quotable. It's a perfect example of what happens when the studio system gets it right.
Yeah.
Guys, where do I Raiders to Christmas Vacation to Serenity to Harvey we mentioned. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. No,
it's always hard.
That's one I regret. You asked me earlier, do I regret a particular review or anything like that? No, I don't do that. But to name my favorite movie ever, no, if I named one, I'd regret that forever. So yeah. give me a list of movies on any given subject, and I'll give you some recommendations in a genre. But
fair enough.
Yeah, that's
fair.
Yeah.
So I'll shoot one final question at you. Because as you said earlier on, so you said you trained as a mechanic, right?
Yeah, originally.
Okay, so in that vein, you've obviously got a love of cars, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So what for you is the ultimate movie car? And if you could own one, what would it be?
Oh, that's low.
You can only have one though, and I've already got my one.
What have you got? DeLorean parked at home?
It has to be the
DeLorean. Yeah, I suspected it might.
There's no other answer.
Oh, blimey. Okay, I will go for the Hannibal Twin 8 from Blake Edwards' The Great Race.
Wow, that's a different one. I wasn't expecting one.
Hey, we're living in Fantasy Island here, aren't we?
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
A lot of good memories for that film. An utter goofball of a car, and yeah. Hannibal 28.
Awesome.
Nicely done.
You guys, come on then. We've had a DeLorean. What else?
He wants to say DeLorean as well. I know he wants to say DeLorean.
I think, to be honest, I think if it was, there's three really, and I'd have to figure out which one. It would either be Ecto 1, not Ecto 1A.
The second on the list for me.
Yeah.
It would be Ecto 1. It would be the DeLorean, or it would be Jeep Wrangler from Jurassic Park.
Oh yes, shoots and scores there. Yeah, I hear all of those. Yeah, that's some good stuff. Yeah.
And I'd have a wing mirror that says objects in the rearview mirror. And every time I drive it, I would say, must go faster, must go faster, must go faster.
I sent you a photo, didn't I, Miles, a few months ago when I was I was on my lunch break, and I went along to like the local supermarket, and in the car park, I parked next to a Jurassic Park Jeep Wrangler.
Oh,
like, what the hell? It was amazing. And I didn't really want to, I just stood there staring at it for quite a long time. Took a few photos.
You just didn't have the heart to get it towed away to a secret location.
Secret location, yeah.
Sean, just before we end this, we'd love to know a little bit more about what you're doing with the Opera Cinema. What your position is there.
Well, at the moment, not a lot, given how shut down the cinemas are, of course. Obra's I wouldn't say it's a small independent cinema. It's 250 seats. Celebrated its centenary last year. I work on the projection side of things. I deal with marketing, social media, so on and so forth. It's a nice little place. We get get a few people coming in and supporting. We've got a few useful sponsors that come along. My role is it's growing actually as time goes on. Getting more involved in the projection side of things, and they've got two twin gorgeous 35mm projectors up there, which I'm so relieved to say they didn't get removed when they went over to digital, which of course is the
I was going to ask that actually, because I know a guy who was a projectionist, and it was a 8 screen cinema in Brighton. And, they got rid of everything for digital, and saw him sort of change over to literally just pressing the play button and zapping in the making sure everything was queued up in the file list, and
exactly, yeah.
Rather than actually splicing the film trailers onto the actual film.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's fantastic, especially for independent cinemas. Like, we can show 3-4 different films a day. It's fantastic. The ability it gives you on.
Oh yeah, and the quality as well, obviously.
Yeah, the quality's excellent, but
I do get why.
Yeah. So overall, digital is a godsend. Don't get me wrong.
It's nice,
especially for the independents. But the fact that they're still sitting there. I mean, what's heartbreaking is the fact that 3 months before I started working there, Neville, who actually there's a great documentary about him, Neville Parry, I believe his surname was actually the oldest working projectionist in the UK. He passed away. He passed away 3 months before I started working there. And I was so devastated, to learn more about him and to realise, this guy that I just missed the chance to work with and learn from.
Yeah, that's a shame.
But I mean, he was well into his 80s and was still working there as projectionist, for a love of film, And, it's a big part of people's lives, and I take my hat off to you guys for doing what you're doing, celebrating film, using modern media moving forward, podcasts and so on and so forth, because it's something that you can talk about forever, and I think it's something that is great to keep alive. Things are going to change. We're looking at the sheer level of CGI and things that we're seeing now. In movies such as Parasite and things like that, the stuff that the hidden CGI that we're seeing.
I watched a YouTube video on that recently, and it was unbelievable.
Yeah, it's incredible. You
The
don't even
techniques they used on it.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? So
it's so subtle. It's one of those films you don't realise it's got that much CGI.
It's kind of create it and throw it away, isn't it? Just pray to God no one notices.
Yeah.
And I think in this day and age where you've got huge TVs at home, you've got great sound at home. In many ways, you've got a superior sound experience, cinema going experience at home in many cases than you've got a lot of cinemas, which themselves are struggling to keep up. I think but there is something unique about the cinema experience, and also something, I guess it's the romance of film that is great to keep alive, and whatever the format and whatever the venue. And I take my hat off to you guys for launching this and keeping that little bit of love for film alive in changing times.
Of course, and if I think if anyone would like more information on Aldborough Cinema and the Aldborough Cinema Trust, you can check them out at aldboroughcinema.co.uk. They also run a young environmental documentary filmmaker competition, which I know has been postponed until 2021. But any listeners out there that are interested in that, then check them out on the website. So, Sean, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And for, of all the podcasts in all the towns in all the world, thanks for walking into ours.
He's looking at you, kid.
Cheers.
See you guys.
Thanks. Bye. So let's go to the video shop corner, where we're going to talk about a classic movie every week that we love, that we've seen, whether it still stands up to the test of time, and a little bit more about the background of those films. So this week, I actually watched an entire trilogy. One of them isn't classic, but it was the Bad Boys trilogy with Martin Lawrence,
Bad Boys,
Will Smith. Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they're coming for you? Bad boys, At the end of the day, Phil, we ride together, we die together. Bad boys for life. I was waiting for you to jump in and start saying it at the same time as me.
I'm sorry. I shut off when you started singing.
Here's the question: Am I Will Smith or am I Martin Lawrence?
No, you're Will Smith. Yeah, definitely.
Is the right answer. Okay, everyone, we'll speak to you next week. No, I'm kidding. So, I mean, I watch these movies. I'm actually not a huge fan of them. I never really was. But I do love Michael Bay. I love, obviously, Will Smith. I went back and I watched all three in the space of a weekend, and sat down and watched the original one. The original one has this kind of weird, kind of neon nighttime, kind of evening sunset day glow vibe that I never really picked on. It has like a slightly noirish vibe.
Yeah, it's like just warmth all over it. I mean, even the cover's like orange, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like they're walking down on a street on like a freeway with a car in the background and like heat lines coming up out of the tarmac.
Yeah.
But I actually really enjoyed it, and I forgot Téa Leoni was in that, and she's stunning in that movie. Wow.
Yeah.
Whew.
It's been such a long time since I've seen Bad Boys. I need to watch them again. I've not seen the newest one either. But
she's great in it as well. She's probably the best actor in it out of everyone. Will Smith is at the start of his career, and you've got Martin Lawrence, and obviously Joey Pants as the captain. But I actually really enjoyed that. I actually really enjoyed it. Kind of a retro vibe. The music is so close to the score of The Rock and Con Air and all of the other kind of Bruckheimer productions.
Yeah,
it's crazy, but actually really, really good. And the bad guy is this kind of crazy French guy that's running around that I've never seen in anything since, with a really heavy French accent. But I quite liked that. I watched the second one.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, apart from Titanic, is officially the longest movie of all time. It's over 46 or 47 hours long. Michael Bay basically didn't cut anything out of this movie.
It's 2 hours and 20. I've just looked it up. It's 2 hours and 27 minutes long. That's a long time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's moments where you see bodies flying out of a refrigerated truck onto a freeway. There's so many gunfights in the streets, car chases. For me, the culmination is one of the most fucking insane things I've ever seen in a movie, and I've seen episode 2 of Space Force with the Chimstronaut. Basically, for no apparent reason, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence join like this kind of, I guess, kind of army paramilitary unit, and then decide to invade fucking Cuba.
It's the Cuban drug cartel.
It goes from Miami to 2 Miami cops walking around the streets, arresting people, to they're now in basically the army and they're invading Cuba.
Yeah. Why not?
Well, I mean...
And what do they invade Cuba in, Miles? Because I seem to remember the one thing that sticks in my mind from that film is the vehicle that they choose to do that.
Well, this is an even more bizarre thing. So they invade Cuba in what can only be described as a neon yellow Humvee. When you consider that Cuba hasn't had any new cars sent to the country since the 1950s, it really is a bizarre choice.
Bumblebee just arrived.
It's like a Transformer. I mean, I guess that's maybe where he started to get the idea for
maybe
Transformers, Michael Bay. But there's a scene where they drive their bright yellow Humvee through a shanty town that's made out of corrugated steel, which I don't even think they have in Cuba. But for some reason, they drive it through this town. And when I say drive it through, I mean they drive it through every Cuban's fucking house, not giving an ounce for the lives that they're probably destroying and crushing as they are literally driving through buildings. I mean, if you watch it, it's like you're watching thinking these guys are like the American oppressors just killing Cubans left, right, and center.
I always see that in films like that when it's just like these police from other countries come over and just completely fuck the place up. It's like, who's going to pay for that? Have they got to pay for that? The government, the American government, or whoever, what country they're from?
Of course they don't. They just get back on a plane and fly back home. They had a great weekend in Cuba. That's it.
Yeah,
the end.
They caught that one guy for the drug running. Thanks for that. Cheers. We're off.
Really, really bizarre movie. But like again, one of those films that you just can't take your eyes off. And I kind of get why Nick Frost in Hot Fuzz is always referencing it. Because it is just a crazy action movie.
What's the third one like? The new one?
So Bad Boys for Life, yes, the latest one. So I unfortunately didn't get a chance to see it in the cinema because of the COVID situation, but I did get a chance to watch it on video on demand, and I actually quite liked it. It's sometimes when they modernize something that's so of its time, it kind of loses something. This is actually there's actually a lot of drama in the newest one,
right?
And it goes to places the other two definitely don't. I don't think there's a scene in it where either Will Smith or Martin Lawrence don't have tears in their eyes while they're talking to each other.
Is it because they're not driving a yellow Humvee?
Maybe they missed their time just murdering people in Cuba with a vehicle. But no, I mean, it's actually pretty good. I didn't hate it, and there's some really good scenes in there. They meet up with a new team of police officers, which again you kind of roll your eyes at when you think about movies where they bring in these kind of new characters later in the sequels. But they're pretty good because it kind of shows how out of touch these two are with modern policing and drones and not necessarily having to be undercover all the time, putting your life on the line, which work quite well. And again, lots of really cool action stuff that happens in there. Definitely a lot of emotion, and again goes to some kind of deep places, which I actually really really liked. And again, you still leave the movie with a smile on your face. So a worthy sequel for sure. And I think they should possibly leave it there now at this point.
Yeah. I mean, with a lot of things that they tend to want to make money on these days.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. So, all in all, I mean, a surprise kind of classic corner that we have here, because these aren't necessarily films that I grew up loving, but I definitely have a new appreciation for all of them, and seeing them in that trilogy, I definitely recommend. It's a good weekend.
I think I need to go away and watch those again. and watch the third one for the first time as well.
Definitely. If you haven't seen them, check them out. I'm sure they're available on Netflix or Amazon Prime, Hulu, based on your location.
And all other good streaming services.
Thank you, Mr. Netflix. All right. So that was this week's podcast. Phil, as ever, thanks so much for being here.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Salutations to you.
And to you.
So join us next week for another episode of the MovieMouth Film and TV podcast. We'll be bringing you another exclusive interview, reviewing some new kick-ass content, and talking about a classic movie in our video store corner. Everybody out there, have a great week, and we'll look forward to speaking to you next week. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Bye.
Bye.
Space Force. I don't know why I did that in the tone of Dynamo.
Why not?